All right, we good? Let's get started. Just doing a little, live coding here. All right. Here we go. All right, we got some HTML on the page. Looking good so far. And then we're going to do some little, we're just going to do a little bit of live coding. Today we're going to build a website. Hope everybody's excited. The website is a tech talk. This is the website. Here it is. There's no external dependencies for this website. It's pretty easy to maintain. It's very fast to load. It's pretty easy to read too, although, we could have some readability improvements, so we might add a little later. Another thing we can add here is editing. Built right in. Let's make something bold. Let's add a new bullet. Hooray! We built the website. Congratulations. Nice job, everyone. But it was a little bit too easy, right? And to be fair, it doesn't look great. I'm not a huge fan of the serif font. So let's make it a little better. Let's add some CSS. Start with just little H1. Add some system UI font family. Fall back to a sans serif so we can get rid of that serif font. Add some nice high contrast black and white text. What else can we add here? Lighten the weight a little bit. Let's make it bigger. And then a nice thing I like is this box decoration break. And we'll add that to our H1. Add a little margin and padding. Add our vendor prefixes, why not? And yeah, cool. Looks a little bit better now. It looks great. Hey, congratulations to us. We're doing awesome CSS. We're doing awesome HTML. We got a good looking website. Let's go ahead and move that CSS into an external style sheet. We'll call it captions.css. And website achievement unlocked. We built our own closed captioning system. Hooray. And now that I have a better mechanism to sort of communicate to you all, I can introduce myself. I'm Zach Leet on Twitter. Let me just add my avatar here real quick. Gotta have that alt text, that's important. Let's make the image a little smaller, it's a little bit too big. We'll add some inline style here. And let's go ahead and move that into the style block in the header. Add a little border radius here. So yeah, my name is Zach Leet, actually Zach Leatherman. I created Eleventy, the static site generator. And professionally, I build websites for Netlify. And let's move that into an external style sheet. Looking good so far. Got a couple of style sheets. We got some content on the screen. Looking good. Now, the easiest way we can use to put this online that I know of is a little website called drop.netlify.com. It is from my employer, full disclosure, but you can just drag a folder of HTML to this site. If you have a Netlify account, you just drag and drop it right on here, and it will publish it online with a public URL. And here it is. If you go to eloquent goldwasser 491fd0.netlify.app, you can see this live. Hooray, we're on the web. We built a website, and now it's published. Woo! Okay, so we made a website. We deployed it to the web. Nice job. We didn't use Git. We didn't use version control. We didn't use a build process. The deploy time was near instantaneous. It's very impressive because it's just copying HTML up to the cloud. But the JavaScript developers in the audience right now are looking to beat down my door. It isn't ambitious enough. And you don't need to send a fully armed battalion to remind me of your love, JavaScript developers. I know it. But very few users care about your tech stack's ambition. It's common to say use the right tool for the job. But I would say use the simplest tool that gets the job done. And it's about 100 times easier, that's a very scientific estimate, to add a dependency than to remove it. That said, our boilerplate below is getting a little bit lengthy. We have 3 external style sheets. Performance gurus will tell you that 3 style sheets is 3 blocking requests that will hurt your page's render time. So let's add a dependency. And you can kind of see the little inline lighthouse there at the bottom. 3 hundos and a 64. We got 4 requests, 2 kilobyte. So let me switch to my editor, or excuse me, my terminal. And we're going to install, we're going to just do an npm init so we can get a blank package JSON in our folder. And then we're going to install, you might have guessed it already, the static site generator I work on called 11D. And ideally, the output from the console would look like this, but instead, it actually looks like this. Some of our dependencies output things to the console. Sorry about that. But we can use 11D to move our styles inline to consolidate those requests into a single one. So let's disable our style sheets one by one and use liquid templating to include our CSS files directly. So we'll disable our captions and then include it in line. Disable our avatars and then include that in line as well. All right. So if we run Lighthouse again on this output, you can see that it's changed. We still have the 3 hundos and a 64, but we're down to 1 request with 1 kilobyte of output. All right, so let's get rid of that 64 on Lighthouse. I don't like it. Makes me uncomfortable. I think I'm breaking out in a rash just seeing that. So what Lighthouse actually wanted was a few meta tags. So let's add those. And let's switch this to use a liquid layout. So a layout file in liquid in 11D parlance is a way to reuse content. So we'll add this boilerplate, our HTML boilerplate, and then we'll reuse that by saying layout, and then we'll point it to our liquid layout. And just will save us some typing moving forward. And if we run Lighthouse on this again, we'll get 4 hundos. Woo! Party time, 4 hundos. 1 request, 1 kilobyte. tiny. So I kind of call this the minimum viable product of 4 hundos. You can actually go pretty far with this pattern in terms of web performance. If I see something in the chat, if people are asking about 11D, if you go to 11d.dev, it's just a small node utility for static site generation. And thank you for people that are linking it up. I appreciate the help. All right, so we have our liquid layout, and we've built a website. This is in stark contrast to what we could have built, which is a slower website, also known as a web app. Getting spicy now. Websites may also be called multi-page applications. You may have heard that before. Web apps are now often called single-page applications. And in contrast, let's build a single-page application. What's the best way to do that? I hear React is good. It's popular for sure. So if you're learning React, it says right on the React.js documentation on reactjs.org. If you're learning React or creating a new single-page app, you should use Create React App. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll go back here, npm install Create React App. And actually the developer experience here is really great. You can add a bunch of different npm packages and it'll automatically bundle those up for you, and you can really increase your page weight size. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. We'll add Lodash, we'll add React, React DOM, Babel, Core JSS, TypeScript, Babel ESLint, Post CSS, Auto Prefixer. Okay. I don't know what happened there. All right, so let's go back, take a deep breath, and just install Create React App. The output's very clean, pretty easy. And then we'll run Create React App with React sample. And wow, it outputs a lot of things. Okay. This is, well, just, okay. It's fine, everything's fine. All right, okay. Okay, it's done. Whew. All right, let's see what it brought up here. Oh, okay, it worked. A lot of console output, but it worked. Cool, all right, pretty lightweight output here. It looks nice, nice mesmerizing logo. If you look in the middle, it really like entrances you. I think it's just, you know, pretty lightweight, it looks nice. This is the output in the actual HTML. And you know that this is an app and not a site, because 4 out of the 5 elements inside of the body have the word script in them. And if you look at the post compression sizes here of Create React App, you get about a kilobyte of HTML. It's nice. About a kilobyte of CSS. Again, lightweight. 1.2 kilobyte in that external SVG for the logo. And then, ooh, 38 kilobyte of JavaScript. And the question I'm asking is that JavaScript necessary? Maybe for a single page application, but is it necessary for the website that we're building? And I would argue no. To render this page, you don't need 38 kilobyte of JavaScript. So in contrast, I built a very similar site using 11D. So let's run that. That's the console output here. And here's what it looks like in the browser. Let's create 11D site. The HTML sizes are about the same. The SVG is about the same. The CSS is about the same. They're both using an external CSS file request. So I tried to architect it very similarly, but using the site paradigm instead of the app paradigm. And here's what the HTML output looks like. So pretty easy to follow. So you might see what's coming here. If you go to webpagetest.org, you can actually test this in a film strip. And it will show you all the frames that render every 100 milliseconds. So you can kind of performance compare these two, the site versus the app bare bones paradigm. And so let's scroll over. This is 3G, regular 3G on a Moto G4 device on Chrome. 1 second, neither have rendered. Very slow connection, regular 3G. 2 seconds. So at 2.3 seconds, we get create 11D sites first render. 2.4 seconds, we actually get the logo to come back. And then let's keep scrolling here. 2.8 seconds, we get the create React app first render. And then at 3.2 seconds, we get the logo to come back. So it's about half a second slower for first render to do the create React app, and about 800 milliseconds slower for visual complete. So you might be saying, oh, well, that's a little bit unfair, right? That's a mobile connection. It's very slow. Regular 3G is very slow network connection. Let's try it on desktop. So if you do a web page test using desktop mode, which is a cable connection, running in Chrome, the create 11D site renders as first render about 300 milliseconds and final render at half a second. And then create React app starts to render, and the logo comes back at about 800 milliseconds. So we have about 300 milliseconds difference between first render and visual complete for the site and the app paradigm. And you could get it even faster if you inline the CSS, but that's not really what we're interested in right now. So another interesting redesign that happened recently, and we'll say recently, I mean 10 years ago in 2019, Twitter did a redesign. They did a new twitter.com. They did a blog post about it, and they used sort of this single page application paradigm to generate their new site redesign. And this was sort of very interesting because they moved from a server rendered previous version to again, this single page application style, load the content using JavaScript. So what I did to make a sort of unfair comparison on both sides is that I made a raw HTML version of one single page of HTML that has the text, the full text of all 31,708 of my tweets. It's about 6.5 megabytes of HTML on disk and almost 2 megabytes after you compress it. And what I wanted to do is performance compare that to just a single tweet view on twitter.com. And I use the mobile.twitter.com URL here to avoid any redirects when I'm performance benchmarking on a mobile device. So if you go to this specific tweet, it's about 2 megabytes in page weight. And let's look at how they render. So again, this is regular 3G on a Moto G4 device using Chrome. When you scroll over, you'll remember that our super lightweight version didn't start render until about 2 seconds. And that's actually when the Twitter logo pops up on the screen. So they have a really great first render that comes up. Awesome, nice job. And let's keep going. 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. All right, so our giant HTML file came back in 5.1 seconds. And importantly, this is first render. HTML will progressively render below the fold too, so you don't, it isn't like this has finished loading at 5.1 seconds. That is absolutely not true. But content has rendered on the screen that is readable to the end user. So let's keep going and see when we can actually read content on twitter.com. 6 seconds, 7 seconds, 8. Oh, All right, changed to 8.5 seconds. We got some buttons at the top, still no content. And let's keep going. 9 seconds, 10 seconds, 11 seconds. All right, so, okay, at 11.1 seconds, we get a little banner saying to use the app. I wonder why that is. Okay, there's, I guess, a whole nother talk that we could have about why they're pushing people to use their app on their website. And let's just keep going. 14.6 seconds is when the text finally comes back on twitter.com on a 3G connection. So not great. So the point I'm trying to make here is that when it comes to your tooling, the defaults are very important. And somehow single page application sort of became the de facto industry default. You remember when we went to the React.js documentation, they immediately said if you're learning React or you're trying to make a single page application, use Create React App. And it's sort of that mindset is pushing SPA to become sort of this de facto industry default. So the first complaint I might anticipate is that the examples I used aren't fair. Both Create React App and Twitter.com both use client rendering, which isn't necessarily a requirement of single page applications, right? And I mean, to that I'd say fair point. Single page applications were kind of, in my mind, historically invented to work around the performance issues with client-side rendering, but that's a fair point. There's a bunch of different flavors of single page applications, right? We can use, as the examples I've used so far, have used client render, which does your components once in JavaScript. We can use client and server render, which sort of puts your components twice in the first render, in the HTML that comes back in the initial payload, and then again in JavaScript, so they can use that for client side rendering later. This is also known sometimes as hydration. And a lot of frameworks are doing this right now. They sort of have this server rendering mode set up by default, but they also include large portions of JavaScript to enable this too. So what I did is I went out to some major JavaScript framework implementations out there and followed their documentation and implemented the hello worlds of each framework. And you can see Gatsby has about 53 kilobyte of JavaScript by default. Next.js has about 60, GridSum 66, Nuxt full static mode 77 kilobyte. And these are all compressed JavaScript files, not uncompressed. And I would encourage everyone to check out this blog post. Tim Kadlec wrote an amazing blog post about the cost of JavaScript frameworks. And he kind of says, the thing about JavaScript is you end up paying that performance tax no less than 4 times. You're downloading the file on the network. You pay the cost of parsing and compiling the uncompressed file. You got the cost of executing the JavaScript, and you have that memory cost too. So 60 kilobyte of JavaScript by default in order to facilitate a single page application is not as necessary as some tool makers might suggest. So the question I want you to come away with today, and the question I would like to ask is the option to do client-side rendering always worth it for every use case? Is it worth it for every component on your page? Your tools have likely decided that it is. They're loading all of this JavaScript by default, no matter what your use case is. If you're making a blog, you still get all that JavaScript, even though it's a content-focused site. You want the content to be readable as quickly as possible. So there is some work happening around this. Some frameworks are talking a lot about partial hydration. You've heard a lot of this in the Vue community and the React community. where you can load HTML for some or all of your components and only use that JavaScript client rendering for some or all for some of the components on your page, and that's great. The question I would ask is how far is it going to go? Will you allow the full end of the spectrum inside of the tools when these features are delivered? Can I create a page that uses just HTML and no client-side JavaScript rendering? Because it is sort of like a continuum, right? When you load your components in JavaScript, use the full weight of JavaScript behind your page's architecture. When you have partial hydration, it does reduce the amount of JavaScript that you need. But how far are they going to take it? Will we be able to deliver fully HTML pages with a minimum payload of JavaScript when these partial hydration features are delivered? And I would say that it would be nice if single page applications were the exception and not the rule. All right, so enough chatter. Let's keep building our website. Let's get back to building this awesome website that we're creating. Let's go back to our terminal. And let's install another thing. Okay, so we want syntax highlighting on our website. Let's install a Leatherman's plugin for this. Leatherman plugin syntax highlighter. Some nice clean console output here. And then let's create a Leatherman configuration file so we can add the plugin so Leatherman knows about it. We'll add plugin, syntax highlight, pass it in. Couple lines of code. And then let's use it on a page. So let's add a pre-tag, a pre-closing tag. It's not highlighted yet. Let's actually add a Prism theme. So Leatherman syntax highlighter uses Prism internally. And the interesting thing about Leatherman's syntax highlighter is that all the syntax highlighting happens in your build. So you don't have any runtime JavaScript at all for code syntax highlighting, which is great. And let's use it on our page. It actually creates this thing in Liquid called a tag, and Leatherman is known as a shortcode. And we can use it like this. So highlight, we pass in the format of what we want to highlight. And then it will automatically syntax highlight for us. So yes, we have good looking code. Hooray, congratulations. Now say we want a little bit more control over the code that comes back from our syntax highlighter. Say perhaps we want to wrap every single character that comes back in our syntax highlighted code with a span, with maybe a class that we determine. So we can operate on each individual character in our syntax highlighter independently. So the Leatherman syntax highlighter includes a utility called character wrap, and we can add another shortcode called highlight character wrap and pass in our source code there, and we can use it very similarly. So if we go to use it in an actual HTML page, we can use highlight character wrap, pass in the format, and it will look very similar. So almost the same thing as what we were doing before, except one small difference. It creates this span around every single character in our syntax highlighted output with a class of char wrap. So we can actually use this to operate on these individual characters. And so we can sort of add another class called type. And if the character that comes back from our syntax highlighter is not shown, then it won't display on the screen. And then we can add just a little script key down, little JavaScript key down handler, and select the next character that hasn't been typed on our screen. And we can add that typed class to it. So say, for example, you wanted to progressively render a new character of syntax highlighted code every time you pressed a key on your keyboard. And let's say, for example, we want to change our syntax for this example to HTML. We can do that so that when we are in our preview window, we can type a character and it will show on the preview. Hooray. Now, let's say for further example, we want to add a little iframe to our preview so that when we type a new character, it will update the iframe's content. So let's select all the characters that have been typed. Let's map the text content of each character to an array, and then we'll select our iframe and use the source stock property to set the content of the iframe. So when we type in our little preview window, it will actually show what we've typed, the syntax highlighted code here, as rendered HTML in the iframe. Now let's say, for example, we wanted to add a little bit of extra style around the iframe to make it look like it's a little fake Mac OS window, so that when we're typing, it would just show on the left here. And we can do that. Cool. All right. Now say, for example, we wanted to go through the entire slideshow again and repeat that same process. We could do that as well. And just for the sake of argument, let's say that we wanted to do that. Okay, you guys get the point. Or you all get the point. So this Tech Talk is a website. It's not published online yet, but look for it soon. Some of the code here is hackathon levels of code quality. So I'm going to clean it up and put it online. And this website is actually a multi-page application. It's a classic, sort of web classic. I think we could have a very interesting discussion about whether this site would have been better served as a single-page application. And I welcome that discussion. But the page weights of these individual slides are so small. If you remember, the Create React app had just 38 kilobyte of JavaScript. The full page weight of each individual slide here is, you could fit four entire pages into one Create React app, which didn't have any very much content on it at all. But I would also say the web is a big pond. There's a lot of different ways to make websites. And I would argue that multi-page applications do make a better baseline for most use cases. But I would not argue or advocate for multi-page applications to be the only way to build websites. My plea today is that we sort of question the assumptions of this SPA by default tooling that we have available to us, especially in the JavaScript community. And the pendulum could really use a little bit more equilibrium. The good news here is that developers are working very hard on both sides, and we're both heading towards this nice middle ground. And I'm very excited to see what this sort of revelation in tooling will do for the web. So thank you for coming to my Tech Talk website. Again, I'm Zach Lee on Twitter, and you can find my website at zachlee.com. Thank you.
Excellent, Zach. Well, thank you so much for the session. First of all, by the way, the clap emoji are always in order. First of all, Zach, I would like to congratulate you on your incredible and impeccable skills in terms of typing on the keyboard. I think that this is just unbeatable, unbelievable.
Not a single typo, right?
Not a single. I mean, there were a couple, but you fixed them really quite quick.
Right.
That was quite impressive. Beyond that, I just wanted to kind of pick up your brain in terms of, so it's kind of clear where we are right now. It seems like we experience this huge wave of JavaScript madness basically over the last 5-10 years. And we kind of explore in many ways this kind of wave of CSS goodness as well, like all the new fancy kind of CSS things are coming as well. But I kind of really wonder, we are now in 2020, so what should we be expecting 2021? Do you really see that more and more websites will be kind of moving towards, I would say, a hybrid thing, which most of it will be static and then only a few interactive parts will be in there? Or do you think that we're still kind of going to move towards more JavaScript and JavaScript everywhere and kind of client-side everything? I mean, I can understand the sentiment that you're coming with here, right? But what do you think is going to happen next, actually, in this landscape of ours in front end?
I mean, the thing that I hope will happen is that, and you hear a lot of this from framework developers, is that they're working on this more sort of hybrid model. So you don't have to be strictly single-page application or strictly multi-page application. Really, the interesting work is going to happen in the middle here. And so we kind of have, in the 11D camp, we were sort of coming at it from this side, where we're trying to use as little JavaScript as possible. And that's sort of our baseline that we're working from. And the more heavy JavaScript bundler-based alternatives are sort of trying to lighten their load, lighten the JavaScript requirement of the websites that they deliver. So I think that we will get closer. I don't think we'll ever probably meet. Mm-hmm. And I think we'll probably have some the discussions will only get more interesting as time goes on, because we'll get closer and closer. But I think the closer we get, the better off the web will be. So I hope that we certainly meet in the middle for sure.
Excellent. Well, just because I'm so forgetful, I was so kind of, I don't know, incepted by inception of your talk that I actually forgot to mention some important MC notes. And that's the fact that, Jack, don't go anywhere. I will still have some questions for you. But don't forget, dear friends, that right now we are actually going to have a live UX audit with Paul Boggs. So we would like your website to be reviewed live in front of everybody else and be torn apart and also get some action points and some guidance about how you could improve the user experience of your site. Please head to the sessions where Paul is waiting for your submissions for the websites. And also we will be continuing on the main stage if you need to take a break or if you want to run errands or anything at 2:10, which is going to be in 25 minutes from now with Sophie. In the meantime, I'm going to have some questions for Zach. Oh, and of course, don't forget, we also have some very friendly sponsor booths that I would like to encourage you to check out as well in the expo. And we have Hopin and Balsamic and Mozilla joining us there. So please do that. Now, Zach, questions. By the way, dear friends, if you have some questions for Zach, feel free to type them in and I'm going to bring them up. But one thing that really bothers me, and I was so happy when it actually happened, when it took a little bit of time for Netlify to move to Broadly, and I was very, 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 very happy about that. And at the same time, we see this kind of movement towards many new shiny things, which I really appreciate because we're running on Jamstack. And so one of them is incremental deployments, right? So it's been it has become a thing when you're running Gatsby. I think they kind of have this incremental deployments already. So instead of redeploying everything all the time, which can be kind of a costly issue and timely issue for big publications where you have to regenerate 3,000 or 4,000 pages, you will actually just redeploy a part or a diff. Where are we in this particular, in terms of this problem? Is it solved yet, or is it still something that we're all working on?
Well, I know that Netlify is always working to improve our build times. I do think, I'm not sure if Gatsby incremental builds are supported. You'd have to ask maybe one of our developer experience people if the incremental builds are supported. I'm not as tuned into the Gatsby community, but it does require a sort of tight coupling between it requires features in the framework and features in the server architecture as well. So there needs to be work done on both sides in that respect. The other thing I would say is that some alternative tools don't necessarily have quite as high of build time requirements. And so the necessity for incremental builds isn't quite as great. So just investigate what's out there, try out a broad variety of tools, and see which one best meets your needs.
Right. Okay. In terms of, maybe I'm just too curious, but in terms of 2020, that is an interesting year for all of us. And well, a little bit preoccupied with everything that's happening around the world. But I'm sure that there is a lot of stuff happening in front end as well. So just because you're kind of at the heart of it all, what do you think are some of the really important developments that some of us might have missed under, in this being preoccupied with everything else? Like, what is happening in front end 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to see what the 11D community has been doing recently. We have 11D leaderboards on our site, and it seems like the sites are only getting faster and faster and faster. So I feel like there's a groundswell of movement around web performance that I feel like is very exciting to see. The other thing, I don't know, there's a lot happening right now on the web. I'm really excited to sort of see lighter tooling output and sort of a simplification of a lot of the tooling that we see in web development right now. So I think the lower the barrier to entry for new developers, the better we are in terms of the web generally. So the easier that we can make our tools, the better. And I'm excited to see where that goes.
That sounds cool. And talking about tools, actually, I think that, it seems like every single talk will have this question as well in the chat, namely tools. Can you recommend any browser extensions, tooling that really saves your day every time you work on anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super biased.
Sorry to interrupt you as well, but yeah, sure. I mean,
sure.
Feel free to show whatever you're using in the browser as well, because you're screen sharing anyway, if you feel like it.
Yeah, I probably won't do any additional live things on my computer right now.
Okay.
Since it's very strategically placed. But I don't know. I am super excited about 11D, obviously, since I work on it nonstop. But the slides that I worked on today were built with 11D, as I said, as a multi-page application. So I do end up using 11D a lot. So it's kind of like the hair club for men thing, where I'm like the president, but also the #1 customer.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah,
that makes sense. That's fine. That's fine. Maybe then just the final one from me to you. It's kind of interesting for me to see that you've been speaking for such a long time about web fonts. Like, this has been the thing. Like, every time we see Zach speaking or writing, it's going to be about web fonts. And now you just abandoned poor web fonts. Now it's like, I don't see you speaking about the web font performance in terms of variable fonts, for example. You just abandoned them and moved on to static site generators and stuff. Is that it? Is it the end of web font performance?
Oh, certainly not.
I mean, thing already.
Oh no, absolutely not. I would say the origin. I keep talking about 11D, but the origin of 11D was actually created to make a web font loading site. So eventually, when I'm not super bogged down by like everything in 2020, I can get back to making that font loading performance website, and I'm sure you'll see more from me in that space.
I would love that. That's excellent. So, Zach, thank you so much for joining. Dear friends, please, again, another round of, I don't know, what kind of emoji would you prefer, Zach? Like a skeleton?
I like the ice cream. I'm a huge fan of the ice cream.
So that's it. Then send as many ice cream emoji as you can to Zach Leatherman. Thanks, Zach, for joining.